You know what's strange about justice? Humans think it's blind, pure, something you can trust. They believe it's written in the language of law books, held in the hands of judges, carried out in the clang of handcuffs and the hammer of a gavel. But I know better, because I can smell the truth, and truth doesn't hide. It sticks to people like a scent they can't wash away, sharp, bitter, metallic, the way pennies taste on a child's tongue. And when lies try to cover it, I know. I smell it. My name is Kylo, and I am a police dog. For 8 years, I've ridden in the back of a squad car, ears perked to the static of radios, eyes trained on the rhythm of flashing lights, nose pressed against the glass, catching whispers of crimes that no human could ever detect. I've chased thieves through alleys slick with rain, tracked murderers who thought the night would protect them, sniffed out bags of powder that could ruin lives before they even began. I've been called a hero, a weapon, a savior. But I am none of those things. I am a dog, a loyal shadow, a set of teeth and instincts sharpened by training. Yet what I saw, what I smelled, what I lived through, it was enough to haunt me. Because I watched a man break, a man who once believed in the very thing he swore to protect. And I know, because I was there, because I was at his side every step of the way, when the case came that destroyed him. His name was Officer Daniels, my handler, my partner, my family. He wasn't a perfect man, no human is, but he was mine. And to a dog like me, that means more than anything. He was the one who pulled me out of a cage when others saw nothing but an unadoptable animal. He looked through the bars, saw fire in my eyes, saw something that could be shaped, molded, saved. From that day on, he was my world. My nose worked for him. My strength answered to his voice. His scent was my home. We became inseparable. He strapped on his vest. I felt the excitement rise. He gripped the steering wheel. I sensed the tension through the vibrations of the car. I knew when his laughter was real, deep and from the gut, and when it was forced, a hollow sound meant to cover the tiredness in his bones. I knew when his hands shook from adrenaline, and when they shook from something darker. We walked alleys together, stormed houses, faced men twice his size and more dangerous than wolves, and I stood between him and every shadow that threatened him. We had a rhythm, him and I. It was a song only we knew, a language of whistles, words, gestures, scents, all stitched together by loyalty. But even rhythms break. Even songs can end mid-note. And for Daniels, that moment came with the disappearance of a little girl. Her name was Emily, 8 years old. Brown hair that gleamed in sunlight, pink sneakers that slapped against the pavement as she ran home from school. She should have made it through the front door, should have dropped her backpack on the kitchen floor, should have shouted for her mother with that small, bright voice. But she didn't. She vanished on a street lined with houses and trees and neighbors who swore they saw nothing. I will never forget her mother's voice when she came to the station. Humans break in ways you can hear, in tones that pierce the air. She cried like her body itself was shattering. Daniels listened. He stood straighter than usual, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowed not with suspicion, but with something else, something personal. He took the case not because it was his job, but because something in her mother's cries reached into him and would not let go. That night, he pulled me close, clipped the leash to my collar, and said, "We're going to find her, Kilo." I believed him. I always believed him. We searched for days. The city unfolded before us like a map of shadows and dead ends. I pressed my nose to the ground, caught the faint trace of her, Emily, her innocence, her laughter, the sweetness of candy on her hands. But the trail didn't stay pure. It twisted, bent, became something darker. Gasoline, rope, the musk of sweat and fear. And under it all, a cheap cologne that clung like poison. I barked, pulled, dug my paws into the dirt, but every time I got close, the trail was cut. Snuffed out as if someone had erased it. Daniel saw it too, though not with his nose. Witnesses changed their stories, as if words could be rewritten overnight. Reports disappeared from the system, like ghosts never meant to exist. Even the evidence, tiny scraps of fabric, a footprint in mud, photographs somehow vanished. Humans called it errors, mistakes, bad luck. But I knew better. I smelled better. Lies leave a stink thicker than rot, and it was everywhere. At night, Daniel sat hunched over his desk, the girl's photo spread in front of him. He would run his fingers over it, not touching her face, but the edges, the paper frayed from being held too often. I curled at his feet, my ears alert to the silence in him. I smelled his guilt, bitter and unrelenting. I smelled obsession, sweat that clung to him like chains. "This isn't just one man, Kilo," he whispered once, his voice rough as gravel. His hands dug into my fur, needing something alive to anchor him. "This is bigger. Someone doesn't want her found." And he was right. The deeper we dug, the darker the air grew around us. It wasn't just a missing child anymore. It was a sickness spreading through places I couldn't chase. Witnesses weren't just scared, they were silenced. Evidence wasn't just lost, it was buried. A name crept into Daniel's files, a name he never said out loud, not even to me. But I smelled the fear on him when he saw it. Fear mixed with rage. Fear of power too great for one cop to challenge. The girl wasn't just missing, she had been erased. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. The trail grew colder until all that was left was the ghost of her scent burned into my memory. Daniel's changed. His uniform grew wrinkled, his eyes hollowed out, shadowed with sleepless nights. He drank whiskey instead of coffee. He stared at his badge like it mocked him. I lay beside him, loyal as ever, but powerless against the weight that was crushing him. He would mutter to me when the city slept, words humans never heard, words only I carried. "Justice isn't real, Kylo. Not when the ones with money write the rules. Not when the ones with power decide who gets to live, who gets to disappear." I pressed my head against his knee. But what could I do? I was just a dog who smelled the truth but couldn't speak it. A dog who watched his human slip further and further away from the man he had been. And still, I stayed, because that is what dogs do. Even when the ones we love unravel, we stay. The city didn't rest, but Daniels hardly lived in it anymore. His mind had narrowed to one point: Emily. Her face followed him into every alley, every diner, every empty street at night. He carried her photo in his pocket like a piece of his soul. I could hear the rustle of paper every time his hand slipped inside, trembling, clutching it as if by holding on to the picture he could hold on to her. His words grew fewer. His laughter disappeared entirely. I smelled the bitterness thick on him now, a permanent fog. Guilt has a weight, and it was crushing the man I loved most. Then came the night we thought we had her. It was late, a storm brewing in the distance. Lightning flickered on the horizon, the kind that splits the sky wide open for just a heartbeat. Daniels drove us fast, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Dispatch had called in a report. Screams near an old storage yard on the edge of the city. The second we pulled in, my nose lit up like fire. Emily, faint but real. I barked, pulled, claws scraping on the floor of the car until he threw open the door. I ran, nose low, heart pounding with a hunter's certainty. We reached the storage yard. Metal doors rattled in the wind, chains groaned like voices in the night. And then I found it, one of her sneakers, small, pink, the laces frayed. I whined, pawed at it, desperate for Daniels to see. He lifted it with trembling hands, eyes wide, wet, alive with both hope and horror. "She was here," he whispered. "She was right here." But the trail didn't stay pure. It twisted again, corrupted. The cologne, the gasoline, the rope. I followed it through the maze of rusted doors until it ended in a corner, soaked with gasoline, in something darker. Fear baked into the walls. But no child, no Emily. When Daniels filed the report, something strange happened. The sneaker was bagged, tagged, logged. But the next morning it was gone. Disappeared from evidence. Daniel's face when he opened the file room and found an empty space where the bag should have been. It was like watching a man realize the ground under his feet wasn't solid anymore. He demanded answers. The officers looked away. Some shook their heads. Others gave excuses. Clerical error, misplaced, chain of custody mistake. But I smelled it on them. Lies. Sour, acrid lies that stained the air. Daniels slammed the locker shut, fists trembling. He muttered under his breath, "They don't want her found, Kilo. They're burying her with paperwork." His voice cracked, and for the first time, I wondered if the case would swallow him before it swallowed me. Still, he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. We chased down every whisper, every lead. Nights bled into mornings. His apartment grew cluttered with maps, notes, photographs, red strings connecting dots no one else wanted to see. I slept at his feet while he worked, dreaming in fits, waking to the sound of paper shuffling, his voice muttering to himself. I smelled the desperation on him, thick as sweat. One night we got lucky, or so it seemed. A drunk driver pulled over on the highway. Daniels yanked the door open, and the moment the man stepped out, I froze. That smell, that damn cologne, the cheap kind that clung like poison. It was laced with gasoline, rope, and something even worse. Fear soaked deep into his skin. My hackles rose, teeth bared, a growl tearing through me before I even knew it. Daniels knew too. His eyes sharpened. He snapped cuffs on the man, pushed him into the squad car. I paced in the back, whining, pawing, desperate for him to understand what my nose screamed. Daniels leaned close, growled words into the man's ear that I couldn't understand but could feel. Rage barely held back. For the first time in weeks, Daniel's eyes burned with purpose. He thought we had him. He thought the nightmare was over. But the next day, the man was gone. Released, quietly, without trial, without explanation. Insufficient evidence, they said. The judge had dismissed it before the case even began. Daniel stood in the courtroom, fists clenched, his entire body trembling as the man walked free, smirking, adjusting his cheap tie. I wanted to leap at him, tear him down, but I stayed at Daniel's side, loyal as ever. The smell of victory that should have been ours was poisoned with the stink of corruption. Back at the station, Daniels punched the wall so hard his knuckles split open. Blood dripped down his wrist, warm and thick. It stained my fur as I pressed against him, trying to remind him that he wasn't alone. He sank into his chair, head in his hands, whispering, "They let him go, Kilo." They let him go. His voice wasn't just broken, it was hollow, like the echo of a man who'd lost his faith. After that, everything changed. Daniels kept patrolling the streets, but the fire was gone. The smile that sometimes broke through after a case, gone. The spark in his eyes when a lead turned up, gone. He went through the motions like a ghost in a uniform. At night, he'd sit with me in the squad car, staring out at the city lights. "She's still out there somewhere," he'd whisper, "or she's not." Either way, no one cares. Not the system, not the brass, not anyone. I pressed my head against his knee, but what comfort could I give? I was only a dog who had smelled the truth, but who could never speak it. The badge he once polished with pride now sat on his desk, untouched. Sometimes he stared at it for hours, the reflection of the light flickering in his eyes like a dying fire. Other times he'd shove it in a drawer, slam it shut, as if the sight of it made him sick. I watched him fall further into the bottle, the sharp burn of alcohol masking the heavier stench of despair. He was unraveling, thread by thread, and I couldn't stop it. The city kept moving, cases kept coming, criminals kept scheming. But Daniels was stuck, locked in one place, one moment, one name. Emily. Her scent haunted him. Her picture haunted him. The silence of her absence haunted him. And me, I haunted him too, a shadow that never left his side, because I could smell her still, faint, fading, like a ghost carried on the wind. And I knew he was right. She wasn't just gone. She was erased. Daniels was never the same after that day in court. Something inside him cracked wide open, and though he still wore the uniform, still drove the car, still walked the beat with me at his side. The man I had known was slipping further and further into the shadows. His laughter had long since died, but now even his silence grew darker, heavier. It smelled like damp stone, like a cave with no way out. The badge, once his anchor, became nothing more than a piece of metal gathering dust. Sometimes he would pick it up, turn it over in his palm, stare at it until his eyes glassed over. Other times he shoved it into a drawer as though it was poison, as though touching it might burn his skin. I knew that symbol no longer gave him pride. It only reminded him of a justice he no longer believed in. At night when the city slept, he paced his apartment like a restless animal. The floor creaked under his boots, his breathing ragged, the bottle never far from his hand. Whiskey carried its own smell, hot and sour, but beneath it was something else, something more permanent. Despair. He muttered to himself, words half-spoken, confessions whispered into the dark. "She's out there, Kilo," he'd say, "somewhere, and nobody cares." Sometimes his voice cracked, sometimes it hardened, but always it carried the same truth. He was haunted. Haunted not just by Emily's absence, but by the realization that the system he served was not designed to protect her. And still, he kept going. We rode the streets together, night after night, though I could feel his grip on the wheel tighten whenever we passed a playground or a school. He stared too long at little girls with backpacks, his jaw set, his eyes burning with grief and rage. To anyone else, he looked like a cop on patrol, but I knew better. His mind wasn't in the present. It was back in the alleys, in the storage yard, in the courtroom where justice had slipped through his fingers. The file remained on his desk. Though marked closed, it mocked him with its silence. Every so often, he would open it again, shuffle the papers, stare at Emily's picture until his hands shook. He never spoke her name out loud anymore, but I could hear it in the rhythm of his breath, in the way his heart raced at night. To him, the case wasn't closed. It would never be closed. One evening, we sat in the squad car, engine idling, rain tapping the windshield. The city lights blurred through the water like smeared paint. Daniels leaned forward, his hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles blanched white. "Do you know what justice is, Kilo?" he asked me softly, though he didn't expect an answer. "It's not the law. It's not the badge. It's not even the truth. Justice is whatever the powerful say it is. And the rest of us, we just play along." His words were bitter, but his scent was worse. A cocktail of rage, grief, and exhaustion so thick it made my chest ache. I pressed my head against his leg, but what could I do? I was only a dog. I couldn't tell him what I smelled, couldn't reveal the trails no one wanted me to follow. All I could do was stay. That's what dogs do, even when the ones we love are falling apart. The months dragged on, each one eroding him further. His uniform grew shabby, his eyes hollow, his laughter a memory I could barely recall. I watched him drink more, sleep less, lose himself in a world that had stopped believing in him the way he had stopped believing in it. He became two men, the officer who still patrolled the streets because he had no other life left, and the broken man who sat in silence when the shift was over, drowning in the ghosts of a little girl he couldn't save. And then one night, something shifted. We were called to a disturbance in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where trouble usually didn't dare step. A neighbor had reported noises in an abandoned house at the end of the street. The moment we pulled up, my nose twitched. Fear, old fear, buried deep in the walls. My hackles rose before I even left the car. Daniels noticed, his eyes flicking toward me. He knew to trust my instincts. We pushed inside, the floorboards groaning beneath our weight. The house smelled of mold, of dust, but beneath that was something unmistakable. Her, Emily, faint like ashes after a fire, but there. My tail stiffened, my body tense. I led him through dark rooms, past peeling wallpaper, until we reached the basement door. I whined, pawed, ears back. Daniel swallowed hard, then opened it. The basement was empty, just broken furniture, cobwebs, a cold cement floor. But I smelled her there, stronger now, mixed with rope, sweat, gasoline. She had been here. Recently, long after the case was closed, Daniels froze, his flashlight trembling in his hand. His eyes glistened with something I hadn't seen in months. Hope. For a moment, the fire returned to him. She was here, he whispered. God, Kilo, she was here. But the trail ended, as it always did. Cut off, erased, smothered. Daniels slammed his fist against the wall, the sound echoing through the hollow house. His voice cracked, raw and broken. They'll bury this too. They'll bury it all. He sank onto the floor, head in his hands, while I pressed close, my nose against his shoulder. I could smell his tears before they fell. That night, I realized the case wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about Daniel himself. He was fighting not just for a little girl, but for the man he used to be. The man who believed justice was real, and he was losing. Piece by piece, he was losing. I wanted to save him. I wanted to bark the truth until the walls themselves confessed. But I couldn't. I could only sit in the dark with him, breathing in the scent of despair and loyalty, knowing that the only thing holding him together was the promise he whispered to me every night. We'll never stop looking, Kilo, even if the world doesn't care. Even if it kills me, we'll never stop. And so we didn't stop. We kept searching, though the city turned its back, though the system had closed the book, though hope was little more than smoke. We searched because Daniels refused to let go, and I, his dog, his shadow, would follow him into darkness until the end.